get today we have Owen Blakka Ellis. Owen Ellis, known as Blakka. Owen Blakka Ellis is an experienced educator and creative artist whose skills and experience span multiple skills, including teaching and lecturing, designing and facilitating workshops, script writing, poetry, storytelling, and theatrical performance. Although he has worked all over the world as an actor, a motivational speaker, a workshop facilitator, and educator, Ellis is known for his over 3 decades of work as a leading stand-up comedian. Interesting. He is one of the powerhouse behind the success of popular Jamaican TV series such as The ID, did I pronounce that well? The ID and Fancy Cat Show, a project he worked on as principal writer, also as a co-producer. He studied drama in education and also theatrical art at Edmund Manley College and social work at UWI, and also master's degree in environmental studies from York University in Canada, where the focus of his scholarship was on the section of culture, gender, and environment. A passionate advocate for gender justice and family values, he is a member of CARIMAN, the Caribbean Male Action Network, and a consulting associate with Parenting Partners. His commitment is community development, includes serving as a member of Rotary Club of Kingston, Jamaica, East and Port Royal, chairman of the board of directors for Trentown Primary School, and besides of this, the Optimist Club of Trentown. Mr. Ellis is currently a senior lecturer at the Edmund Manley College of the Visual and Performing Arts and a member of adjunct faculty at the Management Institute for National Development. And here we are with him. Pay attention, listen carefully, and watch. Mr. Owen Blakka Ellis, the lead is yours.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, Toastmasters, and your wonderful guests as we get together to share some ideas. Sakafet, howdy, wagwan, respect, manners, greetings, all the various other ways that we in the Caribbean greet each other. I want to share a short talk with you, a conversation really, sharing my ideas around some thoughts that I have around how we use humor and how we allow humor to be used. And my main point is to debunk the idea that comedy is just for laugh. It might sound strange when I say that, but I want to propose that comedy is serious business and laughter is serious consideration. So I am presenting for your deliberation a deeper consideration of what we sometimes dismissively you as just little joke or a laugh. The Caribbean is unquestionably a melting pot of creativity. And the Caribbean creative energy is renowned throughout the world. Our music, our dance, our instrumentations, but we very often put us in a place of low value and understanding of comedy. And I want to propose that it's time we allow comedy and comedians to claim space as a valid, viable, and important genre in the broad spectrum of the Caribbean cultural and creative industry. Comedy is serious business. And I, in fact, would say Caribbean comedy, carry comedy. And when I say carry comedy, I mean both carry, C-A-R-R-Y, carry comedy. If we carry comedy, we bring remedy. And if we understand the Caribbean comedy, the Caribbean comedian and his or her role, we understand that we are ignoring a vital and important element in our transformation as a nation and other people. I muse quite often around the idea that if I'm traveling across borders and I enter an airport and immigration asks me, what do you do for a living? And I say, I'm an educator. They say, okay, thank you, and I'm going through. If I say I'm a comedian, invariably, they say, really? Give me a joke. Say something funny. And I usually respond by saying, if I were a basketballer, would you demand a slam dunk? If I said I was a singer, you demand that I sing a song on the spot? But for some reason, once you announce yourself as a comedian, folks expect you to turn on the laughter and give a joke. I want to make the point that comedians not only crack jokes, we crack boundaries and we make history. Comedians not only give joke, we actually provide a very important therapeutic injection in daily life. All the science agree that humor, that laughter is very important. All the science agree that when you might not laugh because you're happy, but I promise you, you'll be happy if you laugh. Because when we do laugh, the body does something. The release of endorphins and our body's natural feel-good mechanism gets activated. So we might not laugh because we're happy, but we'll be happy if we laugh. And therefore, laughter is very important. I became a comedian because I learned that I had a very difficult upbringing and a very difficult and traumatic childhood. I went to high school and I felt very odd. I felt very different. I felt very ugly. But I learned that if I allow people to start laughing first, I became the joke. But if I begin to laugh and indulge the laughter and activate the laughter and manage and channel the laughter, then I become the joker. And therefore I have power over the laughter. And that created for me a career in comedy. I tell folks, very few people understand that or even know that there was one Jamaican comedian who became Governor General. We had a comedy duo back in the day called Ike and Mike. And Mike was Eric Coverley, who was the husband of our famous comedian and cultural icon, Louise Bennett Coverley. But Ike became Governor General. Ike was Florida Glassfoot. So if a comedian can become Governor General, we have comedians in the Caribbean who have MBAs, who have grad degrees. So I very often have to stop folks and say, hello, the comedy role is not a cubby hole. The comedy role is not a cubby hole. A comedian is not a clown that you can turn on or turn off. I save my comedy for the stage. When I'm off stage, I'm a serious educator. And I should be able to maneuver both areas, to inhabit both areas without being forced into one. You're a comedian. I end up at the doctor's office and I'm in pain. And somebody walks in and I'm like, Blakka, how are you doing? And I'm like, but I'm sick. I'm at the doctor. Folks have met me at a funeral. Look at me and say, oh, it's a serious. You know, the comedian. And I'm like, hello, somebody died. But for some reason, we tend to put comedians in this space where they're fixed frame that says, you're a comedian, make me laugh. I want to propose that the comedy role should not be a comedy role, we should allow comedians to easily maneuver and move across borders because laughter is not all we do. It's only one part of what we do. So the point I'm simply making is that we might not create the picture, but we can influence the frame. I want to propose to you, Toastmasters, that we consider, converse around, deliberate around, and understand the notion that we might not get a chance, we might not have the power to determine our picture, but we can determine how we frame our picture. I use my difficult life to create a career in laughter because I chose my frame. And I want to propose to you that the frame is a very important element. And by frame, I am presenting an acronym. The F is focus. We have to choose our focus. We have to decide how we look at things, how we focus on things, and what do we give deep attention to. We choose our focus. That's the F. R, we choose also our responses. We know all the well-known cliched phrase, when life gives you lemon, make lemonade. And that's a response to life giving you lemon. Make lemonade. Choose our responses. The Bible tells us that a soft answer turns away wrath and giveth words stir up anger. I am driving and I entered a one-way illegally. Well, no, not a one-way, a wrong, no right turn. I turn right and the policeman steps out angrily with his hand up. He said, stop. And he's angry and he says, driver, you never see the sign because the sign said no right turn. And I made the right turn. He was angry. You didn't see the sign. And I smiled and said, yes. And he was into you, boy. He called me a boy. But I smiled sweetly and said, officer, sir, yes, I'm sorry. I did see the sign, but I did not see you. And I watched him fight the laughter and then chuckle and say, all right, go through. My response made all the difference. We have to choose our response. Choose our F, our focus. Choose our R, our response. And then the A, choose your approach. How do you approach life? Again, comedy has taught me that my approach can make a big difference. Approach in terms of physically, how you walk into a room, how you walk out of your house every day, but also how do you approach life? You approach life in a way that says, I'm fearful, or that says, I am excited. Focus, response, approach. And then M, choose how we manage our engagement, choose how we manage our conversation, choose how we manage our relationship, and choose how we manage our time. And then the E, expression. Choose our expression. Words are powerful. For us who believe in God, we know that God spoke the word into being using words. God said, let there be, and there was light. So expressions are very important. We choose our expressions, and it can make a big difference. And that is what I share as a comedian. A particular focus, a particular response to something, a particular approach to life, a way to manage that says, I feel good is a decision. I'm going to wake up every day and decide to feel good, and decide to see the humor in every situation. Decide to see the laughter, the potential laughter in every context, and select that. So therefore, I won't be the joke. I'll be the joker. Because I'm not just a joker, the joker in the pack. I can become king if I so choose. But my simple point is, don't see the comedian as simply comic relief. See the comedian as a therapeutic engager. See the comedian as somebody who's not just there to change an awkward situation into one of levity, but somebody who has a very valid, viable, and serious role to play. Now we transform relationships. Not only that, comedy is a very growing and viable way of making good money. I work full-time as a lecturer, and I work part-time as a stand-up comic. And I tell you that there are times when I do a comedy event, I perform for 15 minutes, that I earn the equivalent or more than my monthly salary as an educator. So comedy is also a way to make money. It's big business. It's serious business. The comedy is not just about laughter. The clown is not just a clown. The clown is a teacher. The clown could be a preacher. The clown could be an instigator. The clown could be your inspiration. So that my thought, I wanted to share and then pause so we may have a chance to engage if you have some questions to ask. But I close with the idea that one of our biggest comedians of yesteryear, Ronnie Williams, his first comedy show was produced by a man who became a major hero, Marcus Garvey. So even Marcus Garvey understood the importance of humor. And our very famous Jamaican comedian who said, and I quote, she said, every hole has a sticker bush. Every long road has a bend. Every hot sun has some shady tree. And the longest prayers have amen. Amen. I now open the floor for any questions you may want to ask me.
Sa Blakka, you're the comedian? Think it was a joke, no?
What flavor?
Live here.
So feel free to ask a question or two. Or maybe...
How do you suggest that we get the mindset change as it relates to comedy, and not just comedy, but the arts in general as a profession? We all know the starving artist, right? How do we change the mindset for people to start investing in the arts?
I think it begins with education. I think if we start with education, with helping young people to understand that here's a viable area of employment that requires training, that requires expertise and experience, that requires resources. If we start with education, and if we encourage Caribbean governments to invest resources in that, then we might begin to make a change in how we understand the role of the comedian. So that's a place to start. And for us to understand that nobody is one dimension. That nobody is one dimension. We all play various roles in life. And I am constantly having to remind folks that I am not here for your comic relief. And not just that, I'll do that because my entry into comedy wasn't as an attempt to be a comedian. It was using humor to heal myself, using humor for my therapy for a difficult life. So I learned that humor had a role, and I share that. So when I'm with a group of friends and people who I like, I want to make them happy. So I will share a few jokes, and we all do that. We all share jokes. That tell folks also that giving a joke doesn't make you a comedian. Because comedy is not just to share a joke, but it's to You use humor to tell stories. Use humor to shape context. Use humor to bring people together, to transform situation. That's what comedy does and can do. I think your raised hand, Clive Bowen.
Yeah, thank you. Good to see you again, Blakka. Well, first of all, a light moment and then a more solemn one. There is a parallel to what you said about being asked to give a joke because you're a joker. It is said a man was invited to a high dinner in London by all the lords and ladies as an afterthought where the list had been made up. They said, what else are we missing? They said, oh, invite Mr. Scott. And by the way, ask him to bring his violin. So when they called back Mr. Scott and said, bring your violin, he said, it does not eat. And so he went without his violin because he was at dinner. Anyway, yes, it's the first time seeing you to talk since you lost the other half. Let me say, we all lost the other half. So it must be a solemn time for you, even a comedian, because I grew up knowing Bello and Blakka.
Right.
We know we are mourning the loss recently of Bello. And so how does that come into play in your work as a comedian? Because of course, we know you shared many moments together. You will not make light of his passing, and yet you can teach crucial lessons in the way you do it by referring to the experiences you've had together.
Right. Ironically, he died on my birthday. So I will remember his death every time I celebrate my birthday. And that for me is a very interesting lesson from life, in that we inhabit contradictory frames constantly. Life is good and bad, and the reality is life and death. And we constantly balance humor and seriousness. We constantly balance life and death. So I'm very aware that that is just the way life is, and I embrace that. We in the Caribbean are a case study in contradiction. We put the fun in funeral. We have a thing that we call a dead yard, when somebody dies and we have set up a night. And there's nothing more lively than a dead yard. Think about that. There's nothing more lively than a dead yard. That's the way we are in the Caribbean. So we've learned to use, as Miss Lou said, take king teeth, keep a heart bone. Use a smile to cover the pain. And we do that constantly. Because if you simply cry, we cry alone, but we laugh together. And laughter brings people together all the while. So I'm constantly trying to find ways to diffuse the negative and to infuse the positive. The balance, your team said building resilience. And I might even provoke that team and say, sometimes we have to dial down resilience and balance resilience with resistance. Here's how I put it. When the wind catch the palm tree at the top, the palm tree swings up and bends back, that's resilience. If you punch me and I bounce back and come forward for more, that's resilience. If you punch me and I say stop, don't punch again, that's resistance. When the wind hits the tree in the leaves and it bends, resilience. But if a person or a car is that same tree at the base, they bounce back, that's resistance. You have to sometimes balance resilience with resistance.
Thank you, Blakka.
Any other questions?
I know we have many, and we'll be putting it in the chat because our time for our talk segment has elapsed.
Yes.
But I know that we have millions of questions, and I'm hoping you'll be willing to answer them in the chat for us.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you, Blakka. And also, I will ask you to join me into that big round of applause for our talk show for Blakka.